In the current war, January is a month of preparation for the spring campaign. Cold weather and snowfalls make offensive operations difficult. At the beginning of 2026, both armies are also regrouping their forces. However, this time, both the Russian offensive and Ukrainian counterattacks continue on several sectors of the front. The Ukrainian armed forces withdrew the remnants of their troops, who were fighting almost completely encircled south of Kostiantynivka on the banks of the Kleben-Byk reservoir and from Mirnorad east of Pokrovsk. This allowed some forces to be redeployed from Pokrovsk to Huliaipol in the Zaporizhia Oblast, where a large-scale Russian offensive continues. However, the Ukrainian Armed Forces Command will likely soon have to reinforce the Pokrovsk sector again. There, the Russian armed forces are amassing an increasingly powerful force for an offensive on the Kramatorsk-Slovyansk agglomeration. In Pokrovsk, the situation has stabilized following the withdrawal of Ukrainian armed forces units from Mirnorad. Fighting continues on the flanks. Neighborhoods of the town of Radinsky have changed hands several times in recent weeks alone. Fighting is also ongoing in the opposite flank, on the approaches to Grishino, a large village that has become the main fortress of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Pokrovsk sector. Ukrainian armed forces attack aircraft continue raids into the northern districts of Pokrovsk, likely to prevent the accumulation of Russian forces in the city and the creation of a base for further offensives on Dobropilya and along the road to the Dnieper. South of Pokrovsk, Ukrainian armed forces were able to stop the breakthrough of Russian forces through the village of Novopavlovka to the north to Mezevaya and the Pokrovsk-Dnieper road. In this case, agents with the Atesh partisan movement scouted the headquarters of Russia's Second Combined Arms Army, where Russian forces plan assaults and coordinate operations around Pokrovsk. The Atesh movement reported the information. As the partisans noted, this facility is a key brain center for Russian forces. This is where assaults are planned and Russian military operations are coordinated on one of the hottest sections of the front. Atesh added, the partisans noted that this headquarters manages operational command of the 21st and 30th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigades, as well as the 385th Guards Artillery Brigade. These units are known for their meat assaults and disregard for the lives not only of Pokrovsk residents, but even of their own personnel. We know the nature of their orders, the real scale of their losses, and the morale of their units. Every one of their crimes is recorded and will not go unanswered, Atesh emphasized. During the reconnaissance, the movement's agents documented the headquarters territory and adjacent facilities, identified vehicle numbers of leadership and operational services, studied the security system and patrol schedules, and personally observed the chief of staff and several high-ranking officers. The partisans have already passed all the information to Ukraine's defense forces. Severe strikes are expected here soon. This will lead to a management chaos in the Russian army. Previously, Atesh partisans reported that in the Pokrovsk direction, Russian officers are increasingly submitting requests for transfer to rear or less dangerous units. In the Pokrovsk direction, Ukrainian defenders stopped assault actions by Russian forces in the areas of the settlements of Shakove, Fedorivka, Rodinsky, Mirnorad, Pokrovsk, Kotlin, Udachne, and toward Filia and Novopavlivka. According to information from the 7th Corps of the Airborne Assault Forces, Russian forces are attempting to break through into the northern part of Pokrovsk. This refers to the area above the railroad. Recently, the 25th Separate Airborne Syecheslav Brigade of the 7th Airborne Assault Corps repelled an attack by more than 20 Russians and destroyed the assault group. Russian forces are also attempting to conduct active operations in the area of the industrial zone on the northwestern outskirts of the city. The goal of Russian forces is to accumulate forces for further advancement toward Ryshne. However, the defense forces are acting proactively, using strike UAVs and artillery, preventing Russian forces from concentrating forces and means or deploying offensive actions. Dmytro Snehiryov, military expert, said. According to him, in the zone of responsibility of the 46th Separate Air Mobile Brigade, Russian forces made an attempt at a massive assault using armored vehicles. Russian forces through tanks and armored vehicles, together with manpower. Thanks to the coordinated work of our engineers, artillerymen and unmanned systems units, the enemy assault was repelled. Russian forces suffered serious losses during the attempted assault. Destroyed were 2 tanks, 2 armored vehicles, 59 Russian troops were eliminated. It is worth noting that the battle for Pokrovsk is increasingly turning into a struggle for logistics and resources, which is exhausting Russian forces. It is already effectively half of January 2026, and the boastful statements by Russian forces about taking full control of Mirnorad, about taking control of Radinsky, not to mention Pokrovsk, do not correspond to reality. This is evidence that the Ukrainian defense forces are not only managing to hold back further advancement by Russian forces, but are also successfully counter-attacking in certain areas. The Ukrainian armed forces conducted a series of successful counter-attacks in the Radinsky area and did not allow the Russian forces to take control of either the city itself or Ukrainian logistics routes. Thus, recently in the city of Radinsky, Ukrainian forces eliminated another strong point of Russian troops. The operation was carried out by fighters of the Special Unit Omega West with the support of National Guard units. It is worth noting that in almost 2 years of combat operations in the Pokrovsk direction, the Russian army has lost about 1,000 units of armored vehicles and more than 500 tanks. In this section of the front, the Russian army is also suffering catastrophic personnel losses. Personnel losses in the Pokrovsk direction are among the most serious for the Russian occupying army. They are comparable to the personnel strength of the entire Leningrad military district. There are recorded episodes when Russian FPV drone operators work against their own soldiers, who are trying to surrender to the defense forces of Ukraine. Essentially, the destruction of personnel by their own forces is taking place. At the same time, I state that despite statements by Russian propaganda about full control by Russian troops over the city, the defense forces of Ukraine maintain control over part of Pokrovsk. Despite all the fakes from the Russian side, according to data announced by the Ukrainian Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief, the defense forces of Ukraine have stable control over about 16 square kilometers of Pokrovsk, with a total city area of approximately 29 square kilometers.